Hello and welcome to this book launch. You're with us at the Arth Culture Fest. My name is Palki Sharma Upadhyay, and we are going to discuss this book today, The Art of Resilience by Gauranga. He's an IIT Bombay graduate turned monk who is a leadership and mindfulness coach based in Mumbai. Also a member of ISKCON's Governing Body Commission, actively involved in enhancing leadership effectiveness and governance of temples and communities globally, and also guiding a lot of people on how to lead a better, more fulfilling, more meaningful life. Let me welcome Gaurang Dasji here.
Thank you so much, Palki. Thank you.
So good to have you here. I've read your book and I have personally benefited, I would say, a lot. And I'm a voracious reader, and we usually read about fiction and geopolitics and all sorts of things. But I understand why books like these take you on a different level. And at the very beginning, you have declared that this is not a self-help book, though it has helped me personally a lot. So which category would you put your book under if it is not a self-help book, sir?
Yeah, actually, when I say it's not a self-help book, the idea is that the self in Sanskrit translates as Atma, and the Atma could refer to the body, mind, intelligence, and the soul. And therefore, when typically the books which recommend solutions in today's context, they connect the mind only to the body and the nature around. But this kind of a book is bringing in message from the Bhagavad Gita, which also refers to the Atma as the soul. So therefore, when I say that this is not a self-help book, what I mean to say is that we have to understand the solutions provided in this book are based on the Bhagavad Gita, and it is of a pathological nature and not symptomatic, as the Bhagavad Gita deals with these 5 topics: Ishwar, Jeev, Prakriti, Kala, and Karma. Just like if there is a laptop, you need a manual, and when you see the manual, then you can operate the laptop in the best possible way. So therefore, when we have a self-help book which does not refer to how the entire body was created and how the design was made, then you may land up in either, number one, a bad effect, just like during the British time, they had the cobras and the number of cobras went on increasing. So they declared that anyone kills a cobra and brings, then we will give them a few paise. So for some time there was some effect, but then they saw that the number of cobras are increasing, and they found out that many people had started rearing cobras because of the lure of getting something in return. So when the intended effect is worse than the original problem, they call it the cobra effect. So therefore, just like a recipe book, if it is not used and implemented and applied, it will not have the proper effect. Like that, if there are many such different theories, but if it is not put into practice, it's not going to have an impact. So therefore, all the information mentioned in this book will only have its impact when there is shravanam, when you hear or study it, mananam, contemplation, and third is niridhyasan, you try to implement it in a deep manner. And therefore, this particular book comes in the category of truth, tradition, and transformation, which is equivalent to Shastra, Guru, and Sadhu. And the ultimate intention is to create self transformation with the ultimate understanding of trying to impact others. Action combined with intention is discipline. And this book is meant to help people to create hope in the most hopeless circumstances. And therefore, by strengthening your character muscle, by exercising gratitude, tolerance, forgiveness, and compassion, one will actually be able to generate real selfless transformation by which we can engage in selfless service and empathy for others.
It is titled The Art of Resilience, 40 Stories to Uplift the Mind and Transform the Heart. And I have to say that this book couldn't have come at a better time, Gaurang Dasji, because as you know, we are dealing with a once-in-a-lifetime situation. This pandemic has really taken its toll on people. How do you build resilience at a time when there is death and devastation and misery all around you?
Thank you very much, Palkiji, for asking this question, because currently we are dealing with a very, very emergency situation In fact, there are three types of resilience. One is physical, where the body needs to respond to certain sudden impacts upon it in terms of disease and things like that. Second is the community resilience, where what we are experiencing today in India, that as a society, it's a great test on how we are able to overcome this challenge and be resilient and deal and cope with the adversity. And the third is the psychological or the emotional resilience, which is specifically the topic of this book. And this psychological resilience refers to the ability of our own mind to bounce back in these kind of difficult situations. So there are five ways in which we can actually build this resilience. Mahavipattau samsara yasmarit madhusudana vipattau tasya sampatti bhavet ityaha shankara. So the idea is, number one, develop a character so that we can make the right choices, to make responsible choices, and to experience self-worth. Second, we need to develop capability on how to handle situations effectively. This verse, which I just quoted, mentions that by making the right choices and honing your capabilities, you can convert your adversities into sources of prosperity. And therefore, individuals develop a set of skills to help them trust their judgments and make responsible choices. So, apart from the choices and the character and the capability, the third element is commitment. Individuals enhance their commitment by demonstrating capability in real life situations. Because only when one actually implements the various activities which they have thought in their mind and commits to things in spite of adversities, then one really grows. The fourth element is community. When we have close ties to family, friends, and community, this provides a sense of security and belonging, and it helps us become mentally and emotionally strong. Fifth is, in the midst of all the adversity, we should not stop contributing. So, contribution is the fifth element because that reinforces positive reciprocal relationships. And so, when stress mounts, many people they show stress related performance symptoms, health symptoms. They worry, they feel hopeless, they experience various aches and pains. They allow the problems to preoccupy their mind, and many times they are unable to function properly. Resilient people resolve the conflicts. They have the ability to turn disruptive changes into new directions. Resilient people learn from this process and they become successful and satisfied in the process. And therefore, to develop these five ways to become resilient, we need to actually have the ability to create courage. When we have that courage, then we will have that drive. And otherwise, escape, denial, avoidance, self pity, depression, hopelessness will overwhelm us. So we have to embrace the change and see it as an opportunity. And therefore, we find that in the Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna experiences dejection in the first chapter. And why? Because Arjuna is experiencing an identity crisis. He is identifying with his body, with his wife, with his children, with his home, with vehicles, with money, with career, and with social status. And when one starts identifying with these eight elements, each of these eight elements is subject to change. And when things change, we do not have control over any of these eight elements. And therefore, if our sense of identity is based on the cumulative collective idea of all of these eight, then as soon as one of these change, then our identity threatens to be changed. And therefore, we are always fearful of such changes. And when Arjuna saw in front of him Bhishma and Drona, there was a change and transformation and fear because he thought, Bhishma is my grandfather, Drona is my teacher. I must respect my teacher, I must love my grandfather. So how can I kill? So therefore, Arjuna's identity went through a crisis. And so it became difficult for Arjuna to estimate how much that change will frustrate his wishes, his needs, his obligations. And so Arjuna experienced a deep sense of dejection. In spite of having the best skill to fight, that circumstantial change made Arjuna lose his will. And therefore, the first chapter of Bhagavad Gita is known as Arjun Vishada Yoga, which basically means that there are ways and means by which even scenes of dejection can be transformed, and we can utilize that opportunity to learn more. And the three attitudes to facilitate such resilience is described in the Bhagavad Gita as Yajna, Dana, and Tapa. Tapa means participating, prioritization, absorption, attention, improving your imagination, and at no point of time withdrawing from activity. So continue participating in spite of difficult, adverse situations. Second is yagya, which refers to problem solving, and play within the circle of influence and pray and plan in the circle of concern. And third is dana, which refers to pathfinding, that apart from participating and problem solving, you have to be actively soliciting ways of pathfinding opportunities to understand, learn, grow, and share with others. And in this way, we have the context of Arjuna, where he converted an adverse situation where he lost the will to fight by hearing the proper context of how beyond these eight different changeable identities which are subject to the influence of time, Krishna revealed to Arjuna that there is an unchanging element within called the soul. And based on that, Arjuna could anchor all of his thoughts and developed new hope, and then he could fight. So that's the context.
Okay, so pardon my saying this, does not sort of, you come from a different space in the sense that you have read these texts and you've imbibed their knowledge and you have understood what it means to put yourself in different situations and to accept. Acceptance is very tough for a lot of people. So I'm speaking to you as a layperson. Uh, Fighting a different situation, a different circumstance is one thing. A challenge in terms of your professional life, personal life, all of that can still be dealt with. But here we are dealing with death, where you feel helpless. Here, I have known in the past few weeks colleagues and friends and relatives dealing with situations where your mother cannot breathe and she doesn't have oxygen. And you feel a deep sense of, what shall I say, helplessness. You feel a sense of injustice being done to you because you did not deserve this. That is your first reaction. So your book talks about forgiveness. Your book talks about positivity. We all want to stay positive and we all want to be forgiving. But sometimes circumstances are such that it is not humanly possible to remain positive. What is your advice to those people who are, as we speak, struggling with a seemingly insurmountable challenge, and they're losing relatives and friends and loved ones on a daily basis?
Yeah, that's a very important point. Actually, the Bhagavad Gita has been spoken specifically in the context of a battlefield. And the reason is that all of us will be experiencing challenges and difficulties and these kind of traumatic situations. So, first of all, we have to emotionally empathize with the pain and suffering which people are going through. We cannot deny that pain, we cannot avoid that pain, we have to deal with that pain. And therefore, the first thing I would suggest, as per what the Bhagavad Gita says, is accept the reality, accept realistically, and avoid denial. And this is a very interesting concept that Jim Stockdale, when he was in Vietnam and for 8 years, and when most of his other colleagues were subjected to very tough and severe torture, and they departed. They could not survive that. In fact, he was subjected to much further torture than that. And when he came out, he was asked this question, that how did you manage to survive? And what about the others? And interestingly, he said that one of the things which helped me survive was I was realistic and I was not having any false hopes in this situation. Yes, we must be optimistic, but that optimism must be tempered with a fair degree of realism. And so, during the Nazi, trials in the concentration camps, all kinds of stories we have heard. But one interesting concept which was shared by one of the prisoners was maximum deaths would happen just after Christmas, and that was mainly because they were hoping and expecting that around Christmas they would be released, and then when that would not happen, it would really create a heartbreak. So therefore, yes, it's a very difficult traumatic situation, and we need to really reach out and do our level best to deal with this situation in the best possible manner. But at the same time, number one, we have to accept realistically what is this particular situation bringing for me and how I need to deal with it. Second, we also need to aspire philosophically, understanding that misery is compulsory in this world of different types. And then we have a choice of how we can actually control our consciousness, because circumstances many times are beyond our control. And history has repeatedly shown this. But the ability of human beings to come together, give strength to each other, to support each other, and help each other rise above these adversities in one voice, in a voice which is that of shared love, that has been also shown and seen and demonstrated repeatedly. And therefore, we find that when human society goes through these kind of adversities, one of the greatest kinds of losses, beyond the loss of life, beyond the loss of relationships, beyond the loss of assets, is the loss of hope. So, at no cost, we should lose that hope. And therefore, those who are right now fighting these adversities should connect together, come together at whatever level, maybe at the government level or at the social level, community level, individual level, family level. We should support to give each other the maximum hope in these situations. So once you accept realistically and aspire hopefully, then third is you can adjust innovatively. Because if that hope is not there, then it is practically impossible to adjust in the new reality, in the new latest transformed situation. And so in the Mahabharata there is an example where Arjuna had heard the context of how changes will happen in life, and one has to live within the context of being rooted in the unchanging self. And Dronacharya and Arjuna lost Abhimanyu. He became extremely emotional. He was crying. But Krishna spoke to him and referred back to the message of the Gita. And then Arjuna, within a few hours, got back and he was ready for the battle. So, therefore, to feel emotionally affected in terms of trauma and loss is quite natural. And we need to reach out to those who need that emotional support. But then, on the other hand, when we see Dronacharya, he practically gave up his duty when he heard that Ashwatthama is dead. And he laid down his weapons and became totally hopeless and helpless and depressed. Therefore, in different situations such as this, which force us into feelings of hopelessness and helplessness, we need to accept the reality, we need to aspire with hope, and then we will get the strength to adjust innovatively. So it is the duty of all of us as society to reach out and share hope with each other. And if we act in the mood of service and contribution, we will eventually find that things have become better, and through it we have become stronger and wiser. Even if we can't make sense of things, we can make better sense in things, because our actions can be sensible even if our situations may not be. And therefore, sometimes winning may not be possible, but we should refer to whatever is possible within that context and do what we can to adjust and innovate in the current crisis situation.
When I started reading your book, I thought that this is one of the things that I'll tell you. E- Ever since we all of us were children, we all know the rules. We all know that we should be truthful. We all know that we should be empathetic. We should be kind. We should be forgiving. Uh, but then these things become like things that you have to do, but you don't know how to get there. So what I like about your book is that you tell a story, and which helps us identify the problem. Then you tell us why this problem must be addressed and how it must be addressed. And I must say that I've read some of these stories to my children who've also enjoyed and understood it. And I think that's why one of the stories that I liked the most was the empty boat story, where you've used a very interesting term. You've said that he was more like a spiritual shopper than a spiritual seeker. And I think a lot of young people would relate to this concept, and it would resonate with them. What is a spiritual shopper?
Yeah. So actually, if you are looking at the journey of spirituality, then the journey of spirituality consists of five things. It begins with beginning of your journey, that I begin at this particular level of consciousness. Then the second is your destination. Where am I aspiring to go in my journey? Third is what is the experience I'm looking at when I reach that destination? Fourth is what is the route I want to take for reaching that destination? And fifth is the obstacles I'm going to face in the course of that journey. So, if one is serious about a journey, then one would make certain efforts to actually make it happen. Just like some people may have, flats near the airport, and every day on the terrace they may be seeing the flights taking off and landing. But then there is more to the journey than just seeing the flights take off and land. You have to make certain efforts, you have to take certain decisions to make sure that the journey actually begins. And therefore, when I speak about a spiritual seeker, it means someone who is willing to admit and accept that there is this world which is temporary, and there is an eternality of the soul which is eternal. And so the examples are given in the Bhagavatam of the temporary nature of things in this world in the form of tourists meeting in a temple, or travelers coming together in a restaurant, or sticks coming together in a river, or fallible soldiers, dreams that will end, or elements scattered by the wind. So, therefore, when we are looking at spiritual seeking, we are actually looking at comparing attention with attachment. Without genuinely investing in relationships, situations, aspirations, how can we make any progress in those areas? Where attention grows, energy will flow. And therefore, how are we giving our attention to transform and spiritualize our various attachments? Secondly, when we are looking at certain decisions to be made, yes, so there are emotions, but then we cannot be just driven by emotions to make decisions. So let us compare intelligence with our emotions. An attentive person is driven to act by spiritual intelligence. He needs to clearly understand the broad need and purpose behind their endeavors. Whereas an attached person is driven by fleeting emotions, and therefore he is flickering in effort and determination. And therefore, the third principle is a genuine spiritual seeker is able to distinguish between the temporary and the eternal, and he is actually able to commit himself very, very systematically, just like Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, Vyavasayatmika buddhi ekeha kurunandana bahushakha hi anantascha buddhayoho avyavasayanam. A very beautiful word Krishna uses. He says Vyavasaya Atmika. So Atmika means in spiritual life. It refers to a spiritual seeker. So, what is the main symptom of a spiritual seeker? He is Vyavasai Buddhi. So, if you translate this word into English, it becomes business like professionalism. So, Vyavasai means business, Buddhi means intelligence. So, we approach business with a certain degree of consistency, with a certain degree of certain degree of systematic approach, and therefore we have to approach spiritual life also with that degree of profit motive, in the sense, what do I get out of this entire exercise of investing in spiritual seeking? So don't just go through the motions, go through to the emotions, and therefore work will become work will become a workload when your mind becomes overwhelmed with negativity. And so, human will is not at odds with the divine will, but the human will is founded and fulfilled in the divine will. And therefore, a spiritual seeker is different from a shopper in the sense that he is detached from the results, but not from the goal. So, a spiritual seeker believes in setting goals, he believes in increasing his focus, but worrying about the results erodes our focus. Therefore, to relish satisfaction, replace expectation with appreciation. And when you do that, you will actually experience the consistency, the discipline of intention, which is actually required to experience genuine spiritual seeking rather than just moving ahead without going through the entire journey and committing to that journey.
Right. You're saying set goals, look at what's at the end of this road for you. We are also often told to live in the present and not worry about what's happened in the past or to fret about what might happen in the future. Yet you have said in your book that the worldview of hashtag YOLO, that is, you only live once, is flawed. How do the two ideas reconcile? How can we live in the present and yet not go with the philosophy of you only live once?
Yeah, thanks for that beautiful question. Actually, we have to be grateful for the past, we have to be purposeful and resourceful in the present, and we have to be hopeful for the future. And we have to progress from being lusty about trying to enjoy things for sense gratification with selfish motives only, to being trustees of whatever has been given to us, so that we demonstrate a degree of responsibility. So the four levels of motivation which Gita addresses is very interesting. And when you approach through that perspective, then you are able to actually reconcile that, yes, you have to live in the present, but it does not mean that you have to dwell on the negativities of the past, or you have to fear about what's going to happen in the future, but you can commit yourself totally. So the first level is the mode of ignorance, the motivation is fear. And many times this happens when we are obsessed with our past. Then the second level of motivation is desire. And this is under the influence of the mode of passion. And when a person is under the influence of desire, then he will do whatever is required to be done to make those things happen. And this may or may not be always be resorting to ethical means. And that creates so much of anxiety. The third level which comes from the mode of goodness, is that activity which is born out of a sense of duty. When we say duty, that is something which Krishna is very much emphasizing in the Bhagavad Gita. Karmanyevadhikaraste ma phaleshu kadachana. That means commit to your duty and you will experience a deep sense of peace and satisfaction. Beyond the level of duty is the level of love, wherein selfless service and the pleasure of the beloved is what is in the core. In every relationship, there is scarcity, impediment, discomfort, and unhappiness. But when we continue serving in spite of all of these, then we are actually demonstrating and sharing love. And so we find that even in the modern context, during the 9/11 attack on the World Trade Center, Morgan and Stanley, they were having their offices between the 43rd to the 72nd floors, and almost 2,700 employees were there. And actually, nobody ever imagined that most of them would survive because the first flight hit the North Tower at 8:46 a.m. The second flight hit the South Tower, in which Morgan Stanley, along with their staff, was situated, just 15 minutes later. But they had carefully gone through the fire drill led by the VP of Security, Rick Rescorla. And because they had heard and learned from the 1993 attack, and after that they took their security very seriously, they prepared themselves very diligently and regularly did these fire drills led by Rick. And the result was, as soon as the flight hit the North Tower at 8:46, 8:47 a.m., 1 minute later, Rick starts evacuating the Morgan Stanley employees from all the 22 floors. And because they were prepared for it, because they took it seriously and rigorously practiced, in such a scenario, only 7 of the Morgan Stanley employees died. And this is a very famous and powerful case study of how we should prepare for the worst, but always aspire for the best. And so, these 6 perspectives towards death, towards loss, towards the worst kind of adversity which just snatches away what is dear to us is very important. The Bhagavad Gita and the Srimad Bhagavat helps us prepare for death in terms of number one, priority. That yes, what is our most important priority? We should try to cull that information. Second, it humbles us, humility, because we realize that in spite of all of our efforts, we are unable to do when that particular situation comes. Third is urgency. We may have various activities, but this is something which I cannot postpone. So, what is the most urgent I need to take care? Death also gives a sense of clarity that yes, I was not sure exactly what to do, what not to do. And it gives us immunity from other kinds of superficial fears because we are able to just focus on what is the most important thing required for me in my life. And most importantly, the Gita demonstrates that if we prepare for it throughout our entire life, we can also view at it as an opportunity. And therefore, these are various perspectives given in our wisdom literatures, which help us transform our perspectives on some of the most difficult scenarios which we may experience in life.
Right. We are all also living a new normal where our social interactions are being limited to screens. I mean, in an ideal world, I would have liked to have this conversation with you in person, but we all are, basically interacting with the world through our screens, and that's true for children as well. So, what is your advice to parents who are raising children in this pandemic? Because children may not express it as much as adults, but what is happening around them also affects them, and they're also the human interactions are that much more limited. So how do we teach them the value of relationships, the value of sharing, all the values that you have underlined in this book while they remain cooped up in their houses.
Thank you so much. It's such an important, urgent need. Every family can actually prioritize these four things. First is association. We have been leading very busy lives before this pandemic in terms of travel, and many times it was difficult for family members to come together. So let us look at this opportunity for parents to be able to spend quality time with the children. And yes, there are compulsory hours which the kids have to spend on the screen, you're right. But then let us try to prioritize other moments where all the family members come together, associate, and then spend quality time with each other, trying to understand each other and nourish each other. Second is B, which stands for books. Let us try to come together as families and read books which would enhance our wisdom, enhance our philosophy, and which will improve our perspectives on things, because this is the golden opportunity for us to create the best sanskars. Many of the parents in India are always wondering how we can inculcate the habit of studying some of our ancient wisdom texts amongst the children. This is a great time where the family comes together, reads through some of these texts, explains the situation, and helps children also process reality from these positive perspectives. C, which is very important, is contemplation. This is a moment for contemplation and reflection about our purpose in life, about what our priorities should be, and parents can have great conversation with children and help them also think and contemplate deeply and train them in this very important skill, because contemplation is hard work. Meditation is hard work. Trying to focus for clarity is hard work. A study done by Microsoft in 2017 revealed that between 2012 to 2017, the human attention span came down from 12 seconds in 2012 to 8 seconds in 2017, and it was less than that of a goldfish. And therefore the number of internet users globally has increased from 413 million in the year 2000 to almost 4.6 billion in 2020, and 65% of the internet users in India use it almost daily. And therefore the amount of losses which distraction causes, even in countries like America, almost like $650 billion worth of losses per year due to distraction, and almost 64% of all car crashes happen due to distraction. So, if we spend time training our children in contemplation, in focus, it will be a time very well spent. And the fourth most important is diet, because as they say, jaisa an vaisa man. So diet is very important, and many times parents have a hard time training children in having a proper balanced diet, and not to be obsessed only with the junk food. And so if you focus on association, books, contemplation, and diet, this particular moments of the pandemic, which is forcing us indoors, but it is also creating an opportunity for family members to come together. And in the lack of better things to do, we may actually miss this opportunity. So therefore I would say that yes, whatever screen time needs to be spent. That's the requirement of the education system. But then apart from that, each family has this opportunity if they prioritize appropriately.
That's very well put. The ABCD of how to make the most of this crisis for families all over the world, not just in India. And I'm going to share it with as many people as I can. We're also a generation that is addicted to social media, and we know that it's a very toxic place. And we usually blame big tech for not being able to control the toxicity. But frankly, it's us, people like us, who make it a toxic place, because once we go on social media hiding behind keyboards, we become darker, nastier versions of ourselves, and we end up saying things that we wouldn't otherwise put in such sharp words. Uh, Social media is the reality of today's life, but how can we change ourselves, transform ourselves to have a more, what shall I say, a less toxic exchange of ideas, and to be able to accept differences of others?
Right. So, I think there are five perspectives which I would like to share on this very important concept which you brought about. Number one is typically people seem to be more aggressive online than when they are in person. And one of the reasons is the distance between people desensitizes people. And also, it has been found that in military, they offer a uniform in such a way that it's easier to actually be violent when you cannot see the human element so clearly. And therefore, people hiding behind various identities, they feel that it's cool to be aggressive when in person they would actually not be able to repeat those same words in the same manner. Second, it's also seen that when people are sharing messages, somehow the trend is that messages filled with hate generate more traction, more clicks than messages filled with love. And looks like these messages spread faster. And so people do get encouraged to share hateful messages more than messages filled with love. Third is, as far as such people are concerned, many of them may be experiencing a sense of loneliness. This is a widespread problem which was recognized in 2018 by the British government, who actually established a ministry to cope and deal with loneliness. And sometimes people may feel any attention is better than no attention. And thanks to technology, today we are more connected than any time in the past, but people are feeling more lonely than ever before. So we need to recognize that yes, these messages may be coming from people who are lonely, who are actually looking for some help, some reach out, some connectivity. Fourth is, when there is so much of information on the internet, in the form of information, in form of statistics, in form of all kinds of analysis, at the click of a button, whole libraries are available. There is such a flood of information which hits our gadgets every single day. So it's quite natural that cynicism roots itself in knowledge. The more you know, the more cynical you become. And therefore, when you know so much about the world and the negativities pervading this world and the issues behind everything, gradually one becomes more and more cynical. And so we find that, children, when they are younger and when they do not have access to many of these uh, kinds of information, they seem to be having some kind of an innocent bliss or joy. And so our society is suffering from the three cancers of the mind: comparing, complaining, and criticizing. When the whole net is flooded with these kind of vibes, then people cannot resist comparing, cannot resist complaining, and cannot resist criticizing. And fifth is, one of the reasons is anger can get you heard even when you have nothing to say. Okay. So actually, how to deal with this situation, that we cannot conquer hate or anger with anger. And so we have to ask the question, when we come across such messages, when we come across such posts, rather than retaliation, we should indulge in reflection. Am I trying to be part of the problem or trying to assist in the solution? Am I trying to help this person? Am I trying, to help this person transform by this message, is the person who's going to read going to feel hurt or going to feel elated? So we have to process all of this information very privately first, and then do what we can to help transform others in the best possible way as per our capacity. So, therefore, the chemical highs cannot cure the life's low. So, we need to go spiritually high, and we have to stop blaming our outside world, and we have to start building our inside and inner world. And so spirituality reveals that our destiny is bigger than the biggest adversity, and hence to lose the will to fight is to lose the fight. And life's misfortunes may be like thorns, but don't press on them, pass through them, because walking away from the problems is not the same as running away from them. And so we need to help people become more transformed, more positive, and understand that all this negativity is stemming from deep seated insecurity and loneliness because of a lack of focus in trying to understand their own real identity. And so, this is a major problem the world is facing. And as a community, we need to see that the same internet and the same online presence can be tremendously used by flooding it with positivity, by flooding it with messages of hope, by flooding it with methods and various technologies which can actually transform human beings individually and communities collectively.
Right. Gauranga, actually, I have a lot of questions for you, but I also understand that it's not possible to download all the wisdom that you have in one session. So I'm going to ask the people who have not bought the book to read it. This is, of course, you don't need a recommendation from me, but I'm going to still say that one of the best quotes from me for me from this book was that problems are inescapable but not pointless. They should serve as opportunities for us to make deeper spiritual inquiries. That is one lesson among the many that will stay with me. So here is the book again for those who haven't bought it, The Art of Resilience. This is a user manual, as you put it, for a meaningful life. Thank you so much for sharing your ideas and for putting them in a book, which can help a lot of people.
Thank you so much, Palki ji, for your time. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you. Pleasure talking to you.
Pleasure talking to you.
Kojo, 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 kojo.